Good afternoon and welcome to this lecture on moral control over artificial intelligence, what it is and why it matters, why we should care. My name is Filippo Santoni de Sio. I am an associate professor in ethics and philosophy of technology at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. And I've been working on ethical issues related to control and responsibility for artificial intelligence or robotics for some years. So as we know, artificial intelligence and robots are increasingly present in our lives in different professional and non-professional domains, such as work, military, healthcare, but also logistics and many others daily practices, such as the use of smartphones. There is a widespread concern that the increasing presence of artificial intelligence in our life may lead to some form of loss of control on the side of humanity or society on the development and the functioning of artificial intelligence. These concerns go from the science fictional concern like the one depicted in this slide, of a supercomputer equipped with super intelligence to literally take over humanity, to more limited concerns, for instance, related to the deployment of artificial intelligence in specific sensitive domains like the military, get into some sort of undesirable results. So this is the question I want to address today. Can we control artificial intelligence, and what does that mean? So the reason why control has become an urgent project is quite simply that intelligent systems like the one we see being introduced in society in the past years are quite different to old engineering systems. Old engineering systems were relatively mechanical and dumb. So you would have this idea of control as one individual controller directly intervening or operating or supervising a system and having the system seamlessly responding to his own or her own intentions or goals or actions, even sometimes more directly. Nowadays, we are seeing complex systems being equipped more and more with intelligent features, with the capacity to sense the environment, to react to the environment, to change their behavior in relation to the behavior of one or more users or controllers or designers. So we are more in a scenario like the one on the right side of the slide, where we have one intelligent agent, be that one of these horses, being controlled by many different peoples through many different relationships. Like if I ask you who's controlling one of these horses, you may say that the horse itself is doing most of the work, but of course there's a driver pushing him, but the horse has been trained by someone else before entering this arena, and there's the public with their screaming affecting the behavior of the horse, and so on and so forth. So the question of control looks more complicated than before. And this complication, issue of control getting more complicated may lead to some loss of control. I want to quickly go through 4 different ways in which we may be losing, as humanity, control over AI, even though not in the same fictional literal term of being taken over literally by an intelligent and possibly evil system, but in some more nuanced but equally concerning ways. So the first way is probably the most obvious, as one we have all seen in the past few years. So as you know, these artificial intelligence systems often work with the acquisition of a massive amount of personal data. And of course, those who are in control of this data are in the position to affect the life of individual persons, big political choices, the direction of a certain economic trend, etc., etc. So we may be losing control in the sense of a big shift of power from some agents, say the users or the government, towards other agents, say typically big tech companies. So the Cambridge Analytica scandal is just one example where you as an individual user are doing something relatively innocuous like using a social network or downloading a plugin for your Facebook, and you think you are just doing this little thing, but this little thing is part of a bigger system which you don't see and you don't control, which is behind the screen, so to speak. And eventually, through you doing this little activity on your social network, this broader socio-technical system controlled by, ultimately controlled by big tech companies, is able to do much more to you and to other persons than you think you, what you thought you were doing by doing your social activity on the social platform. So there's this shift of power from, for instance, in this case, users to big companies. The second way in which technology can, in a way, take over and we may lose some form of control of our life is in the term of the loss of meaning in what we are doing. So there has been a big debate on the future work and what does it mean for us to remain doing some meaningful work in the presence of more and more intelligent machines and robots and systems replacing us in a lot of physical and non-physical tasks. Here again, there has been a big debate about how many tasks will be or can be replaced, what are the technical capabilities and the business models behind this, etc., etc. But from a philosophical and societal point of view, the big question is another one: is how can we maintain this meaning in our life if more and more of what we traditionally assumed would be our way of making sense and giving sense to our life, which is working or engaging in some meaningful work activities, will be taken over by machine? What will be left to us? Is this something that we need to look with concern or not? And how should we design artificial systems and robots if we want to be able to remain a meaningful, at least a meaningful partner in these future work activities? So that's more on the side of AI and robots potentially taking away, not necessarily our physical possibility to do stuff, but taking away the interesting part, our capacity to make sense of what we're doing. So I'm not saying that it is impossible for us to remain meaningful, but just saying that this requires some reflection and some proactive attitude, both in the design of policies for the introduction of artificial intelligence robots and on the side of the design of the systems themselves. The third way in which we may lose control is kind of related and has to do with the accountability gaps. So I define accountability as a specific form of responsibility, which is the capacity to make sense looking backward of something that has happened. There is an accident or some unwanted event, and we want to know who did what and why has that happened. There was this famous show in the UK called Little Britain, and one of these geeks was this civil servant often replying to the citizens that sorry, your your request has been denied. Why? Because computer says no. So that was a caricatural representation of this future in which we may have machines replacing or assisting us in many tasks in such a way that we may not be able to understand what is the logic behind these decisions. And when we try and look back and understanding why, which is something we need to do to make sense of things that have happened, in order to improve them, in order to explain to each other, in order to take responsibility for that, etc., we might be less and less able to make sense of that and to relate to that, which is a big problem in terms of control, because of course there is an important epistemic element of knowledge involved in control over a system. And if we lose more and more the capacity, even experts lose the capacity to look into the system and understand the function of the system, it could be a problem in terms of accountability. And accountability is a big moral and political value. So it's a moral value in the sense that we want to understand ourselves. It's a big philosophical issue and philosophical idea that self-knowledge is important, that engaging in meaningful conversations with others is important, and that's sort of the moral accountability. But also, from a political point of view, whenever you occupy an important function, you also have an extra political duty to account to the public, for instance, about your choices. And this, both the moral and political accountability, may be affected by the introduction of complex artificial intelligence systems. The last way in which may lose control has more to do with a responsibility gap. So not only we may not be able to understand what happened, but whenever something really bad happens, like a car accidents in which people are killed, like an example of the Uber car, self-driving cars in 2018 in Arizona, we may have a hard time understanding who should be blamed for that. And why is that important? Because not because there is a value in blaming in itself, but you may also argue that there is, but mainly because, again, blame is a way to put pressure on people to prevent accidents. It's a way to also to making sure that victims are compensated and get restoration and satisfaction for what they suffered. And if we are going more and more towards a scenario in which, like in the case of the Uber self-driving car, we have a hard time understanding who was supposed to prevent the accident, because there was a distribution of the responsibility across a complex network of human and non-human agents, and there was no clear allocation of responsibility in advance to the different agents, and or the different agents along these chains didn't have sufficient capacity or motivation to discharge their own responsibilities. For instance, in this case, you may say that the driver was to blame because she was just not attentive enough. But maybe the driver didn't receive sufficient training to really be ready or really to be aware of the seriousness of her role. And so you may want to blame the company for making a system that is not safe enough, but the company can say that no, that the company had an agreement with the user where the user accepted some terms and conditions that they would remain attentive. So you may want to blame in this case, the Arizona state and regulators for allowing this complex system to be on the road in the first place. So again, this is not an insurmountable problem. There may be ways out. So responsibility gaps are not a destiny, but again, are a bit concerned. And we should again think of designing these complex systems from a political, technical, ethical point of view in a good way. And that's why you may have been wondering why a philosopher like me should be part of this conversation. And I think that the main reason is that we should go back to, this is the School of Athens, in the painting by Raphael. And the idea was that under the same roof in the School of Athens, you would have philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, but also mathematicians like Pythagoras and Euclid and others. And nowadays we would say engineers, computer scientists, and we should sit down together and designing and reflecting on how to avoid this loss of control. And we should avoid what has been called technological solutionism, the idea that technology can be a solution, technological fixes can be a sufficient solution, answer to technological challenges. This is not right, because what we may see as technological challenges are also societal, political, philosophical challenges. We have to rethink our concepts, the distribution of power in society, the understanding we have of the relationship between technology and humanity, and so on and so forth, which is something that, among many other people, we are trying to do in our university in depth, where we have a specific faculty called Technology Policy and Management, where you have different departments of engineering, social science, philosophy, economics, and so on and so forth. And one concept I have personally contributed to develop in this context is the idea of meaningful human control. So we should rethink the concept of control. Again, if you think of the example of a self-driving car with a relatively low level of automation, just like an assisted driving system, still at this level, you may have this mismatch between the expectation of what you are supposed to do, what you think you can do, the responsibility that you are allocated as a driver, and what you can actually do. So there could be these shifts around of control between you, the systems, a mismatching in between the expectations, the role you're assigned, and the real function of the system, and sort of or sometimes an implicit invisible shift of power towards programmers or designer that is not reflected in our practices of training or attribution of responsibility. So again, the idea of meaningful human control tries to say that if we're going in the direction where we have more and more intelligent and complex systems, we also have a more inclusive and complex understanding of what really being in control of technology means as human beings. And this cannot be just having this individual device responding to my inputs, but it's more having these complex systems being designed in such a way so as to respond not only to the behavior of individual controllers or users, but to the long-term intentions, the deeper needs, the societal interests of all possible actors that are involved in the design and use, according to some criterion of relevance that we should discuss as a society according to a democratic process. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and thank you very much for your attention. And this is my email just in case you want to get in touch with me to discuss more about this. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Cheers.